The scream that shattered the morning quiet of Sunset Manor nursing home carried enough venom to poison the air itself. "She's killing them. That woman is murdering my mother." Karen Whitfield's voice echoed down the pristine hallways. Her manicured finger pointed like a weapon at Maria Santos, who stood frozen beside Mrs. Whitfield's bed, a blood pressure cuff still wrapped around the elderly woman's arm. Maria's dark eyes widened in shock, her small hands trembling as she processed the accusation. 23 years of dedicated nursing, countless lives saved, families comforted through loss, and celebrated through recovery, and now this. The morning light streaming through the window seemed to dim as other residents peered from their doorways, confusion etched on their weathered faces. "Ma'am, I was just checking your mother's vital signs," Maria said quietly, her Filipino accent soft but steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Her blood pressure is slightly elevated, but that's normal for—" "Don't you dare lie to me." Karen's face had turned an alarming shade of red, spittle flying from her lips. "I saw what you were doing. That syringe. That look on your face. You people think you can come here and—" "Karen, please." The voice belonged to Helen Morrison, the nursing home director, who had rushed from her office the moment she heard the commotion. Her usual composure was cracking as she tried to assess the situation. "Let's discuss this calmly. Maria is one of our most trusted—" "Trusted." Karen's laugh was bitter and sharp. "She's been slowly poisoning these people for months. My mother's been getting weaker and weaker, and I know it's because of her. I'm calling the police right now." The iPhone was already in Karen's hand, her fingers stabbing at the numbers with violent precision. Maria felt the world tilting beneath her feet as she watched this woman, this stranger who visited her mother perhaps twice a month, destroy everything she had built with a single phone call. 911. "Yes, I need police and paramedics immediately. There's a Filipino nurse here at Sunset Manor who's been euthanizing elderly patients. She's killing them. You need to come right now before she murders someone else." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that would consume everything in its path. Helen Morrison's face went ashen as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. Other staff members had gathered in the hallway, their faces reflecting the same horror and disbelief that Maria felt coursing through her veins. Mrs. Whitfield, the supposed victim of this alleged crime, looked up from her bed with rheumy eyes, full of confusion. "What's all this noise about Maria? Dear, did you finish checking my blood pressure? I have bingo in an hour." But her daughter wasn't listening. Karen had moved to the window, watching for the arrival of authorities with the satisfied expression of someone who believed they were saving the world. "They'll be here soon, and then we'll see justice served. No more of your people preying on vulnerable Americans." The phrase, "your people," hit Maria like a physical blow. She had heard those words before, usually whispered behind closed doors or muttered in passing. But never had they been wielded as weapons in broad daylight, in front of her colleagues and the patients she had devoted her life to caring for. Within minutes, the peaceful morning was shattered by sirens. Police cruisers and an ambulance screeched into the parking lot, their red and blue lights casting ominous shadows through the windows. Maria watched her world crumble as uniformed officers strode through the front doors, their hands resting on their weapons as if she were some dangerous criminal. "That's her," Karen announced triumphantly, pointing again at Maria. "That's the one who's been killing our elderly. I caught her in the act." Officer Johnson, a tall man with kind eyes, who had visited the facility many times for wellness checks, looked genuinely pained as he approached Maria. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning. There's been an allegation of—" "I know what she said," Maria interrupted softly, her dignity intact despite the circumstances. "But it isn't true. I would never hurt any of these people. They're like family to me." The handcuffs felt cold against her wrists. As Officer Johnson led her through the hallway she had walked thousands of times, Maria could hear the whispers of residents she had cared for, their voices filled with confusion and fear. Mrs. Patterson, recovering from hip surgery, called out, "Maria, what's happening to Maria?" But there was no time for explanations. The authorities had arrived with a single purpose: to investigate a potential serial killer. Within an hour, Sunset Manor was under complete lockdown. Yellow tape blocked entrances. Crime scene investigators combed through the medical supply rooms, and every patient was isolated pending a full review of their medical records. The chaos that followed was systematic and devastating. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the facility's chief medical officer, watched in horror as 20 years of careful patient care protocols were dismantled in the name of investigation. "You can't separate Mrs. Chen from her insulin schedule," she pleaded with the lead detective. "She's diabetic. If she doesn't receive her medication, everything stops until we clear this place." Detective Morrison replied curtly, "No medications, no treatments, no exceptions. We're dealing with a potential mass murder situation here." The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Mr. Rodriguez, who required breathing treatments every 4 hours for his chronic respiratory condition, began showing signs of distress by noon. Mrs. Thompson's blood thinner medication was confiscated, leaving her at risk for the stroke that her cardiologist had spent months trying to prevent. The domino effect rippled through the facility as vulnerable patients were cut off from life-sustaining care. James Chen, visiting his 92-year-old grandmother, found her sitting alone in her room, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, what's wrong? Where's Maria?" "They took her away," Mrs. Chen whispered in Mandarin, then switched to broken English. "They say she bad person, but Maria good. Maria helped me when I scared at night. Now no one come." The isolation was perhaps the cruelest punishment of all. These elderly residents, many dealing with dementia or depression, were suddenly cut off from the human connection that kept them anchored to hope. Without their trusted caregivers, without their routine interactions, they began to withdraw into themselves. By evening, the first casualty occurred. Mr. William Foster, 87 years old and recovering from pneumonia, went into respiratory distress around 8 p.m. His nebulizer treatments had been suspended. His oxygen therapy discontinued pending investigation. When the paramedics finally arrived, called by a frantic Helen Morrison, who had been monitoring patients despite the restrictions, it was too late. The death sent shockwaves through the community. Local news stations picked up the story, their breathless reporters standing outside Sunset Manor with headlines like, "Nursing Home Murder Investigation Claims Life," and "Filipino Nurse Suspected in Elderly Deaths." Karen Whitfield appeared on every channel, her crocodile tears flowing as she spoke about her mother's near-death experience and her brave decision to expose this monster. "I knew something was wrong when I saw how my mother was deteriorating," she told Channel 7 News, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "This woman has been systematically targeting our most vulnerable population. Thank God I was there to stop her before she could finish the job." But not everyone was buying Karen's story. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had worked alongside Maria for over a decade, watched the news coverage with growing anger. "This is insane," she told her husband over dinner. "Maria Santos is the most compassionate nurse I've ever worked with. She's saved more lives than anyone in that building." Dr. Kim wasn't alone in her disbelief. As word spread through the medical community, former colleagues and patients' families began sharing their own stories. Linda Martinez remembered how Maria had stayed late every night for 2 weeks when her father was dying, holding his hand and singing Filipino lullabies to ease his passing. Tom Bradley recalled Maria's gentle persistence in helping his mother learn to walk again after her stroke. But the investigation ground on with bureaucratic momentum. Maria sat in a holding cell, still wearing her scrubs, while detectives combed through years of medical records looking for patterns that didn't exist. Every death under her care was scrutinized, every medication administration questioned. The fact that she had an impeccable record, that mortality rates were actually lower on her shifts, seemed irrelevant in the face of Karen's hysterical accusations. Meanwhile, the conditions at Sunset Manor continued to deteriorate. 3 more residents were hospitalized due to complications from suspended treatments. Mrs. Anderson developed a dangerous blood clot when her anticoagulation therapy was interrupted. Mr. Jackson's diabetes spiraled out of control without his insulin regimen. The very people the investigation was supposedly protecting were being harmed by the process itself. It was during the 3rd day of chaos that the first crack appeared in Karen's story. Detective Sarah Collins, reviewing security footage from the facility, noticed something odd about the timestamp of Karen's supposed witnessed euthanization attempt. According to the video logs, Karen had entered the building at 9:47 a.m. and immediately gone to her mother's room. The alleged incident occurred at 9:52 a.m. 5 minutes, Detective Collins mused to her partner. She's saying she witnessed this nurse preparing to murder her mother, but she'd only been in the room for 5 minutes. What exactly did she see? When pressed for more specific details, Karen's story began to shift and change. First, she had seen Maria preparing a syringe filled with an unknown substance. Then it became Maria acting suspiciously around the medication cart. Finally, it was just a feeling that something was wrong, combined with her mother's recent decline in health. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, meanwhile, had been conducting her own investigation into Maria's patient care records. What she discovered was remarkable in its consistency. Every medication administration is documented perfectly, she explained to Detective Collins. Every vital sign recorded, every patient interaction noted. If anything, Maria's documentation is more thorough than required. This isn't the profile of someone cutting corners, let alone committing murder. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Janet Wu, a nursing assistant who had worked the weekend shift, approached Detective Collins with information she had been afraid to share initially. "I need to tell you something about Karen Whitfield," she said, her voice shaking with nervous energy. Janet's revelation was explosive. She had witnessed Karen making racist comments about Maria on multiple occasions, complaining to other visitors that these foreign nurses couldn't be trusted with real Americans. She had seen Karen attempting to have Maria removed from her mother's care team, claiming the language barrier was causing problems, despite the fact that Maria spoke perfect English. "She told me once that she was going to find a way to get Maria fired," Janet continued. "She said people like her didn't belong in positions of authority over white people. I thought it was just talk. But now..." The pattern became clear as more staff members came forward. Karen had been building a case against Maria for months, not based on any medical concerns, but on pure racial prejudice. She had questioned every decision Maria made, demanded second opinions on routine procedures, and consistently undermined the nurse's authority in front of other family members. Armed with this new information, Detective Collins confronted Karen during what was supposed to be a routine follow-up interview. Mrs. Whitfield, several witnesses have come forward describing a pattern of harassment toward Nurse Santos. Can you explain why you've been trying to have her removed from your mother's care? Karen's facade began to crumble. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just concerned about quality care for American citizens. These people come here, and they don't understand our ways, our values. These people? Detective Collins pressed. What exactly do you mean by that? The racist tirade that followed was recorded, and would later become evidence in multiple legal proceedings. Karen revealed her true motivations with stunning clarity, speaking about foreign invasion and protecting our elderly from third-world medical practices. She had never witnessed any wrongdoing by Maria. She had simply decided that a Filipino nurse had no business caring for her mother. While Karen's credibility collapsed under scrutiny, Maria's reputation was being rebuilt by an outpouring of support from the community she had served. Dr. Amanda Foster, whose father had died in the chaos following the false allegations, initially blamed Maria for the timing of his passing. But as the truth emerged, her anger shifted to its rightful target. Maria Santos didn't kill my father, she announced at a press conference organized by the Filipino Nurses Association. Karen Whitfield did. Her lies and racism created the chaos that prevented him from receiving the care he needed. This woman destroyed lives with her hatred. The Medical Review Board's findings were unequivocal. Maria's care had been exemplary in every measurable way. Patient satisfaction scores were highest when she was on duty. Medical error rates were lowest during her shifts. Several patients had specifically requested her care for complex procedures because of her skill and compassion. Mrs. Chen, Maria's patient whose granddaughter had fought to get her testimony recorded despite her limited English, provided perhaps the most powerful evidence of all. Through a translator, she described how Maria had noticed the early signs of her small stroke symptoms that others had missed, and her quick intervention had prevented permanent damage. Maria saved my life, Mrs. Chen said simply. She good person. Other woman. She have bad heart. The charges against Maria were dropped after 5 days that felt like 5 years. She walked out of the detention center to find a crowd of supporters holding signs reading, "Justice for Maria," and "Nurses are heroes." But the victory felt hollow as she learned about Mr. Foster's death and the suffering of patients she had been powerless to help. Helen Morrison met her at the facility entrance, tears in her eyes. Maria, I am so sorry. We failed you. And we failed our residents. This should never have happened. The reunion with her patients was emotional beyond words. Mrs. Patterson, who had been asking for Maria every day during the lockdown, gripped her hand with surprising strength. They said terrible things about you, dear. But I knew they were lies. You have healing hands and a good heart. But the story was far from over. The families of the harmed residents began filing lawsuits, not against Maria, but against Karen Whitfield. Dr. Amanda Foster led a class action suit for wrongful death and reckless endangerment, arguing that Karen's false allegations had directly caused the medical chaos that killed her father and endangered other patients. The legal proceedings revealed the full extent of Karen's deception. Phone records showed she had called multiple news stations before even contacting 911, suggesting her primary motivation was public attention rather than genuine concern for her mother's safety. Financial records revealed she had been pressuring her mother to change her will, possibly seeing Maria's influence over the elderly woman as a threat to her inheritance. During the civil trial, Maria took the witness stand to describe the impact of the false accusations on her life and career. Her voice was steady, but tears flowed freely as she recounted the moment she was led away in handcuffs in front of people she considered family. "I became a nurse because I believe in the dignity of every human life," she testified. "For 23 years, I have tried to ease suffering and bring comfort to people in their most vulnerable moments. To be accused of the exact opposite of everything I stand for, it was devastating beyond words." Karen's defense crumbled under cross-examination. Her own lawyers seemed embarrassed by her racist statements, which had been caught on multiple recordings. When asked to provide specific evidence of any medical wrongdoing by Maria, she could only repeat vague accusations and conspiracy theories about foreign healthcare workers. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a verdict heavily in favor of the plaintiffs. Karen was ordered to pay substantial damages to the families of harmed patients, with punitive awards that reflected the jury's anger at her callous disregard for human life. The judgment included provisions requiring her to undergo sensitivity training and perform community service at a diversity education center. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the loss of her mother. Mrs. Whitfield, horrified by her daughter's actions and the harm they had caused, formally requested that Karen be banned from visiting the nursing home. In a lucid moment that surprised everyone, she dictated a statement to be read in court. "My daughter does not speak for me." The statement read, "Maria has been nothing but kind and professional. She has treated me with more respect and care than my own family has shown. I am ashamed of what was done in my name." The facility implemented new protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. Discrimination training became mandatory for all visitors and families. A patient advocacy program was established to ensure that concerns were addressed through proper channels rather than public accusations. Most importantly, support systems were put in place to protect healthcare workers from racially motivated attacks. Maria returned to work gradually, supported by colleagues who had rallied to her defense and patients who had missed her care. The first few weeks were difficult as she rebuilt her confidence and processed the trauma of her experience. But the outpouring of love from the community she had served helped her heal. Dr. Sarah Kim organized a recognition ceremony for Maria, attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her compassion. Former patients, family members, colleagues, and community leaders gathered to celebrate not just Maria's vindication, but the values she represented. Maria Santos embodies everything we hope to find in healthcare, Dr. Kim said in her speech. Skill, compassion, dedication, and dignity. The attempts to destroy her reputation ultimately revealed the strength of her character and the depth of her community's love. The ceremony featured testimonials from dozens of people Maria had helped over the years. Stories of lives saved, comfort provided during loss, hope restored in moments of despair. Each speaker reinforced the same truth: Maria was exactly the opposite of what Karen had accused her of being. As the evening wound down, Maria addressed the crowd with characteristic humility. "I did not become a nurse for recognition or praise," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I became a nurse because I believe in the power of healing, both physical and spiritual. What happened to me was painful, but it also showed me something beautiful. When hatred tries to divide us, love can unite us even stronger. She paused, looking out at the faces of people from every background and culture, all united in their support. We are all part of the same human family. When we care for each other, we honor that family. When we attack each other based on fear and prejudice, we dishonor it. I choose to keep caring, keep healing, keep believing in our shared humanity. The applause was thunderous, but Maria's most meaningful moment came afterward, when Mrs. Chen approached her walker, supported by her grandson. The elderly woman pressed a small jade pendant into Maria's hand. "For protection," Mrs. Chen said in careful English, "and for remembering good heart always wins." In the months that followed, the nursing home became a model for cultural competency and inclusive care. Medical students from the local university began doing rotations there specifically to learn from Maria and her colleagues about providing compassionate care across cultural boundaries. Karen served her community service hours at the Diversity Education Center, but there was little indication that she had learned anything from the experience. She completed her obligations with minimal engagement, still convinced that she had been the victim of some elaborate conspiracy to protect a dangerous foreigner. The contrast between the two women's responses to adversity became a case study in character. Where Maria had met hatred with grace and false accusations with dignity, Karen had responded to consequences with resentment and accountability with denial. 1 year after the incident, Sunset Manor held its first annual Heroes in Healthcare celebration, honoring not just Maria, but all the dedicated professionals who had continued providing care during the crisis. The event raised funds for a scholarship program supporting nursing students from underrepresented communities. Maria received the Keynote Speaker Award, but she used her platform to honor her colleagues rather than celebrate herself. "Healthcare is not a job for one person alone," she said. "It takes a team, a community, a shared commitment to caring for each other." What happened to me could have broken that spirit, but instead, it made us stronger. The audience included many of her former patients, now healthy and thriving, thanks to the care that had been temporarily interrupted but never abandoned. Their presence was a powerful reminder that truth and justice, while sometimes delayed, ultimately prevail over prejudice and lies. As the evening ended, Maria walked through the hallways of Sunset Manor one more time before heading home. The building was quiet now, its residents sleeping peacefully under the care of dedicated professionals who had chosen healing as their life's work. She paused at Mrs. Whitfield's room, where the elderly woman was resting comfortably. Despite everything her daughter had done, Maria continued to provide the same excellent care she gave every patient. It was not just her professional duty, it was a reflection of who she was at her core. The jade pendant from Mrs. Chen caught the light as Maria checked the patient's vital signs one final time. The old woman stirred slightly and smiled when she recognized her nurse. "Thank you, dear," she whispered, "for everything." Maria smiled back, adjusting the blankets with gentle hands. "Rest well, Mrs. Whitfield. I'll see you tomorrow." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and Maria Santos walked toward her car, knowing that she had not just survived her trial by fire, she had emerged stronger, her community more united, and her purpose more clear than ever. The false accusation that was meant to destroy her had instead revealed the unshakable foundation of truth, compassion, and justice upon which her life was built. In the end, Karen Whitfield had accomplished something she never intended. She had shown the world exactly what Maria Santos was made of. And what she was made of was pure gold.